My baby is 6 months old now, and it is time to start introducing solids. And yes, I am voicing over this video. There is a huge issue with the audio, but I still want to share with you all of the recipes that I'm going to be making for first introducing solids. We do a mix of baby-led weaning and purees, and I can make a video on that in the future. I can make more videos on kind of no-cook recipes, but today is going to be all freezer-friendly purees. Most of these would be considered stage 1 purees. That basically means that there's one ingredient, maybe an herb or a spice, but the ingredients are relatively simple, just so you can introduce one food at a time and make sure that your baby doesn't have any sort of allergy or distaste for something. Although if they don't seem to like something, the best thing you can do is to keep introducing it, and as they get a little bit older, you can introduce it in other forms, or if you are going the baby-led weaning route as well, you can introduce it in a solid form and a puree and see if they like different variations of the food. You'll see here I am just getting my vegetables prepped. I have an acorn squash that I've cut in half. I have some carrots that I've peeled. I have beets that I have also peeled. And then I am going to roast some sweet potatoes just by poking holes in it and drizzle everything with olive oil, roast it in the oven at 400. I'm just doing it until the vegetables become soft and tender. I'm also going to be doing some steaming and boiling. You can really do whatever works best for you. I find that roasting or even steam roasting, kind of a combo, introduces the most amount of flavor to these purees. So I will explain with every puree and every recipe how I cooked everything and all of the details. So let's get that in the oven, and we are going to start with the first puree, which is a carrot puree. And I am adding my carrots in, and I'm going to also sprinkle in a little bit of nutmeg, because if you heard me talk at the beginning, I said that some of these will have herbs and spices to them. And just because it's a baby puree or you're feeding a baby, it doesn't mean that your food needs to be bland. You can introduce spices like nutmeg and cinnamon and different herbs and just add a little bit more flavor to it, keep it interesting for them. And I'm also adding in some of the cooking water that I use to boil some apples that I'll be using in a later recipe. So the water that I'm adding also has a little bit of flavor to it. You can use a blender, an immersion blender, a food processor, whatever you have. I'm just using this smaller blender cup and adding water as needed. I don't want to add too much water too fast to make it too liquidy, especially when you are freezing these. You really want to make sure you don't add too much water, because when they thaw out, it may have a little bit more water introduced to it, so they can get really runny really quick. So keep them as thick as you can. And then I am going to use this little cookie scoop and scoop them into my freezer trays. These are from Super Cubes. They are 2 tablespoon trays. I find that this is the perfect size for freezing baby food. If you decide later to mix 2 flavors together, then the 2 tablespoons isn't too big. So you can take 2 tablespoons of carrot and mix it with 2 tablespoons of a broccoli puree or something like that. Of course, you could use a regular ice cube tray or something like that, but these are so sturdy. They are reinforced. You can hold them up with one hand. The silicone makes it really easy to push out the cubes. So I would highly recommend these, and I will link them in the description box below. So I'm also going to put a little bit into a glass food storage container to keep in the refrigerator. I'm going to do that for some of these purees, not all of them, because they only stay fresh in the refrigerator for maybe 3 days or so, and the rest I want to freeze. Once you have them in the Super Cubes, ice cube trays, whatever you're using to freeze them, make sure you label them. That is one of the most important things. You want to label what the food is and when it was cooked, just so you know how long it was in the freezer. I like to use this tape and just tape it on there, and then once I transfer these out of the Super Cubes containers and put them into either a freezer bag or a vacuum seal bag, I can peel off the tape with the label and stick it on one of those bags. But seriously, do not sit on labeling these things. Don't think, oh, I'll remember a little bit later, especially if you're prepping multiple things like I am. You are going to quickly forget what was a carrot puree versus what is a sweet potato puree. Later down the road, you're going to forget that you made these maybe and have no idea how long they have been in the refrigerator or the freezer. So whatever you do, label, label, label. The second puree that we're going to be making today is a green bean puree. I steamed these green beans, so they do have a fair amount of water in them, and I'm actually going to add in some fresh basil as well. Use that cooking water, but not too much because those green beans do have some water, so keep that in mind as you are blending up your different ingredients, how they were cooked, and what type of water content the fruit or vegetable has in the first place, and that will help you determine maybe how much water to start with. But again, just err on the side of adding less. You can always add more water. It's definitely harder to take away water once you've already added too much. I am trying all of these baby foods as I'm making them, and I will say the carrot one was delicious. I wanted to lick the spoon, have some myself. This one was surprisingly pretty good as well, and this was actually the first one that I started with after I filmed this video feeding it to our baby, and he loved it. He was a huge fan. He was covered in all green. And actually the second one I did was the carrot puree. So both of those were a hit. And I do have a few more of these super cubes, but I'm probably going to freeze some of these and then push them out into the freezer bags and reuse this container and keep doing more because we have a lot of meals that we are making today, and it really is not that difficult to make all of your baby food from scratch. There's not a ton of need to purchase baby food. I also think these are really great to pack for daycare. I used to do this when we had a nanny who would come to the house, and I would just tell her to pop out a few cubes when she was going to feed our baby lunch when she was there. You could take these on the go with you because they're frozen. By the time you arrive wherever you need them, they'll probably be thawed out. You can warm them up and serve them to your baby warm, or you can serve them to your baby cold. You can kind of play around with it. Usually my baby is totally fine. My babies have been fine with them cold, but if you want to give it just a little warming, you could do that as well. The next recipe that we are going to be making is a broccoli and potato. So the broccoli I steamed and got it pretty soft, maybe a little bit too soft if that's possible. And the potato I boiled, again, adding some of that cooking water. I couldn't quite fit everything in the small blender that I had, so I just did it in 2 stages. Once you blend a little bit, it makes a lot more space in the blender. So I blended that and then added in the rest of the broccoli and sweet potatoes. And I kind of thought this was going to be the worst one, but again, I tried all of these and it really wasn't too bad. Next up, we are making a beet puree, and you can do red beets or golden beets. Golden beets would probably be better just because red beets are going to stain. You need to be really careful with them. I would strip your baby down if you're going to do the beet puree. I added in a little bit of olive oil for more flavor to this one, and then am just blending it up. It made a really beautiful texture, a really bright, pretty color. And then as I've been doing with a lot of these, I am going to put a bunch into the super cubes to freeze, and then I'm also going to put some into a glass container in the refrigerator just so we can have some of that on hand right away to feed my baby. A lot of these recipes might seem like they have kind of more out there ingredients than you would traditionally think. If you are making baby purees from scratch at home, a lot of people think of basics like peas or like applesauce, and those things are great, and I will probably be doing those as well. And you'll see I have some apples and some peas in a few of these different recipes, but it's great to think outside of the box. Today I'm doing a lot of veggie heavy recipes, but you can also do a lot of fruit based ones. You can even do it from frozen fruit and just blend it up and make like a mango puree or something like that. I also would recommend doing a chicken puree or a beef puree if you're looking to introduce some meat, add a little bit of iron. Iron is really, really important for growing babies, so you want to make sure you're getting a variance of nutrients in what you're feeding them. But also, as I've mentioned, that I am trying these foods as I'm making them, and I think a lot of them taste really good. Please don't be grossed out or anything by the foods that you are feeding them, because a lot of times they are very healthy and nutritious. You just don't want to project your feelings about a certain food or the way that it's being fed, especially if it's in a puree. Thinking about pureed meat might be absolutely disgusting to you, but trust me, your baby might end up really liking it. The next recipe I am making is the acorn squash, and acorn squash really is not in season right now. It's the summertime, and I was able to find a really small acorn squash. I am going to add rosemary with this to add a little bit more flavor. There's some olive oil on it, but it's not going to make a ton of food, which is actually kind of nice because I have making so much today. So I cut it in half lengthwise, if you saw at the beginning of the video, and scooped out the seeds and roasted it in the oven. And then I am just going to scoop out all of the contents there out of the shell or the outer skin. It's really soft and tender after roasting in the oven, so it's pretty easy to do. And then put it in my blender with a little bit more of that cooking water and blend it up into a nice puree. And it actually turned out to be a very smooth puree. Most of these turned out really well. I did not have any fresh rosemary, so I just used some dried rosemary, but if you had fresh, I would definitely do that instead. The next recipe that we're going to be making is more of a traditional one. We are doing a sweet potato puree that you basically cannot go wrong with. It is so good. I wanted to drink this stuff up. Sweet potato would be a great one that you could add spices to. You could add cinnamon in there, but I'm going to keep it plain just because I could see myself in the future mixing the sweet potato puree with other foods. And I also want to say that a lot of times you think that you want to give these foods at dinner time because they're vegetables and we eat vegetables at dinner or maybe lunchtime. But I start by feeding my baby one meal a day, and then we'll slowly progress to doing 2 meals a day, then 3 meals a day. And as they get older and kind of turn more into a toddler, we do 3 meals a day and 2 snacks. But you can really be creative and feed them whatever, whenever. I just like to do it when I am eating or the family's eating. So with our first, I was at home and would have breakfast before I started work and was at home for a little bit before our nanny showed up because she didn't show up till 10 o'clock. So I would do breakfast every single day with my baby and I would eat so he could watch me eating. That's kind of how they learn. And now with our second, he leaves for daycare so early that just doesn't really make sense. So we have been doing dinner as a family and just been feeding him food at dinner time so we can all eat together and have a family meal. Now, the last recipe I'm cooking here is probably not necessarily what you would consider as a stage 1 baby food recipe because it does have multiple foods together. I am doing apple, peas, and spinach. I did wilt the spinach a little bit. I steamed the peas and then I boiled the apples, adding a little bit more of the cooking water. The apples do retain a lot of water, so they have a lot in there. So keep that in mind as you are blending it. You saw me sneak another little bite there, and it was actually very good. Surprised again how good all of these recipes are. Please give them a try if you are introducing solids. Share this with a friend if you have a friend who has a baby and they're just introducing solids. Again, I will have so many other videos. Please let me know in the comments below if there's something else you're interested in. And I want to thank you so much for joining me on this motherhood journey as together we make it sophisticated.